Hey everybody, it's Christian from Human Risk with a coronavirus related story, and I'm gonna keep my hands down so I don't set you a bad example of touching my face while I do it. Now the story I want to tell you comes from Mannheim in southern Germany, where the local authority imposed a limit on events of 1,000 people. One particular concert hall decided to take this very, very literally and invite in 999 guests and then close the door. Clearly, that is not what the rule intended, but that's how they sought to interpret it. This is classic letter of the law, not spirit of the law compliance. So really, really bad in my opinion from an ethical perspective. They should have thought through what the law was trying to do and probably cancelled the event in its entirety rather than thinking that having compliance with the 1,000-person limit would somehow make the world a safer place. The point of those rules is to stop large gatherings and disease spreading. It doesn't magically become safer when you have got 999 people as opposed to having 1,000 people. Really dumb piece of thinking there by the people organising it. But you could also argue that it's a direct consequence of the way the rule's been structured. I happen to think 1,000 people is a ludicrously high number if your objective is to stop spreading, and bearing in mind that just one single spreader could infect a whole host of people, the risk doesn't magically decrease unless, of course, the difference between 1,000 and 999 is that there's only one person who's spreading the disease and you've somehow kept them out. That is a ridiculous proposition. So on that basis, I think this is one really bad interpretation. As my friend Roger Miles highlights, it is lawful but awful, and from an ethical perspective, it's a terrible piece of decision making. But if you're responsible for writing rules, have a think about that yourself. It's very tempting to codify things, to put numbers on things, and particularly in the kind of conduct and ethics space, that number or that codification might not be appropriate. And if you have got a target audience that tends towards complying with the letter rather than the spirit of the law, you should think that through before codifying. So I think the authorities need to take a certain amount of responsibility for coming up with what I think is a really silly way of limiting events. I would have set the number much, much lower and used much more fluid language around it to make sure that people understood it wasn't a strict limit where safety was on one side of it and danger was on the other. So that's a valuable lesson for all of us there. Do make sure, firstly, that you are washing your hands on a regular basis. Secondly, try not, as I think I've managed in this video, to touch your face. And the third thing to do is, if you're interested in this particular topic, do check out the Human Risk podcast that I released yesterday. Richard B. Strong and Ruth Steinholtz, both of whom have been guests on previous episodes of the podcast, and I sat down to have a conversation about the ethics of running events during a pandemic. Came out of the fact that we were due to be meeting at an ethics event ourselves. That's now been turned into an online conference, quite rightly. And so we thought we'd have a discussion around the ethics of running events at a time like this. It's available wherever you get your podcasts, or I'll stick a link either on the screen or, if I can manage to remember to do that, a link to the Human Risk website. Thank you so much for watching. Do stay safe and remember, wash those hands. Thanks for watching.